What's up, y'all? I am Daniel Winter. I'm here to cut some hair with you guys and tell you guys about this product that, you know, luckily I've been fortunate enough to work in many different avenues in this industry throughout the 15 years I've been part of it. I've seen a lot of product lines come and go, including one that I started. And when you get something new in your hands that really hasn't been done before, not just from the product itself, but from what the brand mission is, you know, I choose to only work with companies that I can stand behind and put my name in front of now. And Venture is definitely one of those. So today we're gonna cut a mullet. I don't know if you guys can tell the theme and our model. It's by far one of my favorite haircuts to do. It's also one of the easiest haircuts to mess up if you don't know what you're doing. Preservation of length in specific areas is mandatory, as well as the idea and concept of building shape, not just creating a fade. So without further ado, let's get our model in here and cut some hair. And throughout this, if you guys have questions at all, please feel free to shout them out. I know the flyer said look and learn, but this is very much an ask and learn situation. I'm not the end all be all of hair, but hopefully something that I provide you guys with education wise today changes the way you guys do something in the future and makes you a little bit better behind the chair. Sound good? Sweet. All right. What's up? No, I'm an Aquarius. I enjoy long walks on the beach. You know. All right, so a couple of things that we need to take into consideration before we even approach or start to approach this haircut is exactly what we want the finish of this to look like. So there's a couple different ways that you can approach a mullet. You can go with like your traditional Tennessee tailgate. You can go with your Detroit waterfall, your Texas tailgate, or something like this, which is a little bit more fashion forward and definitely something that you're gonna be seeing a lot more of now. At my shop in LA, we get a tremendous amount of requests for mullets. People just starting to grow them, and then people that have had them established for a while. So if it hasn't hit Vegas heavy yet, it's going to, for sure, I promise you. So I want to preserve a lot of the length that he has here in the back, definitely rework some of this layer that's going on. Might have a little bit of a chemical cut going on there, so we'll have to approach that, you know, with grace once we get there. So the first thing I want to do is section everything off. I essentially treat every mullet like 3 individual haircuts so that I don't get lost in the sauce, and I run that same blueprint on every single mullet that I cut. So I'm just gonna get a tiny bit of moisture in the top, try not to get anything on that temple area where we're gonna be doing the taper. And all I'm gonna do is what we call, where I teach, standard sectioning. So I'm gonna take out segment 3 on top. And then I'm gonna split this from right behind the apex of the head. I don't wanna go on the apex, and the way that I find that is just putting my comb right there, find it. I'm gonna go 2 fingers behind that apex. That just gives me a little bit more natural flow to the length that we're gonna preserve in the back. Then I'll clip everything behind that back. So this is gonna be the meat of the haircut right here, everything forward of this section that we just took. Everything behind it, since we wanna preserve majority of this length that we have back here, we're definitely gonna cut into a little bit, but majority of this haircut takes place on the front half of the head. So now I'm gonna section that segment 3 off on top. And we're definitely changing up, you know, his haircut from previous. a pretty significant amount. Boom. So the way that I approach my fades, I take the same blueprint on every single haircut that I ever do. For anyone who's familiar with the haircuts that I do, I finish everything natural, and 100% of my haircuts are provided by just one guard size. I only use a 1/16 guard on everything. So just being super comfortable with clipper over comb is gonna work a world of wonder for you if you do try to adapt to any of my cutting techniques. That being said, we'll strap our 1/16 on, and I'm gonna run that just to the parietal ridge and make sure my C shape is super, super strong. I wanna start the graduation for my clipper over comb before I even approach with clipper over comb. So I'm gonna work up to the parietal and start my C shape out. Yes. Yeah, I can't see up there. Thank you, Elliot. Is that good? I just thought you wanted to see my back for a minute.
Did before I went down.
Cool, and you guys can, oh, hey, calm down over there. And you guys can see that just really, really relying on that heavy, heavy C shape has already started that graduation for me. You can see that transition in color. Another thing that I like to speak on when I'm talking about the way that I do my blending, there's this very common misconception in men's haircutting and just haircutting in general, anything on a short scale, and that's that a fade needs to go short to long. But that's not necessarily what we're trying to do. Everything we're trying to do is work through a color gradient, and that's light to dark. Now we know density changes on every single head of hair that's ever sat in our chairs. So we have to address that and make sure that we're taking into consideration how that density changes, whether it's more dense or less dense, and how we can mitigate all of those issues to get that smooth, seamless transition from light to dark. Does that make sense? So for me, like, that was one of the big breakthroughs in my career is the minute that I started to disconnect short to long and light to dark, that's when I started getting way, way more comfortable with just blending hair and building haircuts. Same thing on this side. I'm always gonna check for continuity from left to right, especially when I don't necessarily have a mirror. And I'm running my machine 3/4 of the way open with my tension arm. And the reason for that is because we're all human. I make a ton of mistakes and I want to be able to compensate for those later. So when I go through with my clipper over comb, I'll explain why I run this 3/4 of the way open and not all the way open. Sweet. All right. Now I'm going to transition to my liner and we're going to put in our bald line, or what would be our bald line rather. So I'm going to work maybe 1/2 inch into the interior of this haircut for this taper. Still relying very heavily on that C shape. That C shape is your best friend when it comes to blending. Again, check your continuity left and right. Looks good to me. Now, tension arm all the way open. We're gonna work another 1/2 inch up into the interior. Same thing on this side. Put my 1/16 guard back on. 3/4 of the way open to close is gonna take out that top line. And when I'm working on these blends, I'm only using like 1 or 2 teeth at a time. I don't want to start putting lines in this haircut and start creating lines that I'm chasing all the way up. So if I'm only using 2 teeth at a time, I can be very nitpicky about where I'm deciding to pull color from and where I'm deciding to address the weight issues of the blend. Back with no guard, and I'm still only utilizing that corner technique. And then everything below this with the beard we're gonna address later, so I'm gonna pretend like none of that's even there. I have extreme ADHD, so if I start thinking about something else, I'm gonna be lost. So I have to work step by step, and that's why not only is it for efficiency and speed, but it's for my own mental health. Like if I don't follow the same exact steps every single time on a haircut, I don't even know how to get through a haircut from start to finish. All right, every once in a while, I'll utilize a second 1/16 guard. So traditionally the ones that I use are from Speedo Guide, the red guards with the, I don't know, what's that little hook thing on the back called, Elliot, you know? There we go. There's always gotta be one in every room, right? All right, so this is a wall 1/16 guard or the half guard. So I'm just gonna run that over everything to make sure that this blend is as buttery as possible. I tend to stretch out my blends a little bit further as well. I don't like those super short stacked blends. I like everything to transition well and be as smooth as possible. Boom. All right. Clipper over comb. Probably the most important technique in all of short hair cutting. I don't care what anyone says. It is by far the most important technique that you can get proficient at. It's gonna save you a ton of time behind the chair, and it's also going to allow you to build shape better than any other technique that you can use. Anyone can go paint by numbers and run through a series of guards from 4 all the way down to skin, right? But it takes skill that your clients absolutely will pick up on and notice if you're building a haircut for them from the ground up. And that's what I refer to this as. I mean, we're cutting hair, but we're also building something from the ground up. Every fade starts at the bottom and works its way up, right? So we're building this haircut. So the way that I do clipper over comb, I work off a series of 3 angles that are all 45 degrees. There's no rhyme or reason for that, but it goes back to if I follow the same exact plan every single time, I know that I'm gonna provide the same exact outcome for my guest that's in my chair. So my 45s, I go 45 to the horizon, 45 away from the head, and teeth of the comb 45 degrees towards me. Mathematically, it still doesn't make any sense in my head, but those are just the angles that I ended up on. So I wanna make sure that we maintain as much weight right there at the parietal ridge as possible, because we can always mitigate that later. But if we take off all that weight right now, we're gonna be here for like 3 weeks waiting for that to grow back before we can start to address it again. So Start from the bottom, make sure I catch my guide. Tension arm open. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm leaving it super, super heavy at the parietal ridge. Not only is this going to build that contour and build that shape on top, I prefer never to follow someone's head shape. I don't know when the last time everyone in here shaved their head, but we all got some messed up looking heads when there's no hair on them. So it's super important to be able to build a flattering shape for each and every one of your guests. And then you guys will see as I start to get almost to the mastoid process, I'm gonna start to change the angle of my comb and pull my comb away from my anchor point as I'm working through the haircut. That's gonna be able to accelerate the length that I'm preserving and make sure that we're not gonna cut too far into this mullet. So you guys will see I take it and then I pull my comb out with it. And what that does is that just gives me that extra grace so that we can go back through and work on that later, but make sure that we're still providing a decent blend there on the sides. Then we'll do the same thing on this side. Boom. So for those of you that don't know, I'm colorblind. That's messed up, Anna. I'm also terrified of horses and aliens, in case anyone was curious. Is there anything else we need to bring up while I'm up here? Damn. What's up?
Is it comfortable for you to cut it down?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got like freak, like hobbit feet. I grew up going to like Havasu and never wore shoes as a kid. So my feet are just like, I don't know. My toes are all separated like this so I can grab onto rocks when I walk around. So wearing Vans at work is never an issue. But I do get the ones, I don't know, these are like the comfy cush, right? So they're like super squishy. There's zero arch support, but they're hella comfy. And I don't know, my feet are like too wide to wear like a lot of Nikes and stuff, so these are perfect.
One drink in, dude.
For those of you who don't know Stacks, I'm sure you'll meet him tonight. All right, so we got the beginning of our blend established. Now we're gonna start working on addressing everything that's on top. You always wear your hair parted off the left going right?
Yep.
Cool. Not anymore. Just kidding. This was dealer's choice, right? All right. So now I'm gonna saturate the head. Typically I would do this at the shampoo sink, but we're already here. All right, so I'm gonna make sure that this hair is sectioned exactly where I want it before we start removing any of this length. We got 2 recessions that we have to address before we decide to start making anything cut-wise on top. So I wanna put this part in the most flattering part of the head, depending on where those recessions are. I think I dig that. Sweet. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take 1/2-inch vertical sections all the way back, slight diagonal back. That's gonna get the hair moving away from the face. So that's gonna aid in this haircut being able to style itself and him tomorrow being able to replicate that much more easily. One of the most important things in this industry is you can give someone the sickest haircut ever, but if they can't replicate your work tomorrow morning when they wake up, that haircut's shit. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard when it comes to educating our clients on why we're doing things and how they can better replicate our work. So that's where product comes in. Product is super, super important. And the better we can educate our clients on how to use the products that we have at our station, one, the more money you're gonna make because you're gonna sell a hell of a lot more of those products. And number two, you're gonna have happier clients because they're gonna be able to wake up tomorrow and have the same exact look that you gave them when they walked out of the shop that day. Make sense? Cool. Y'all got any questions? I feel like I'm just talking a lot.
I'm glad you said that, bro.
What?
I know, like, probably a lot of people here that have never heard that before. So I'm really glad that you said that.
Never heard what? Oh, because you say that all the time? Great minds think alike, my friend. I'm gonna finish chewing this ice. All right, so slight diagonal backs. I'm not gonna go a full 45. It's just gonna be like ever so slightly. Make sure I'm working in nice, manageable sections. And that angle that we created with our clipper over comb, I'm gonna continue to take that up. I wanna build as much weight as possible right there through that parietal ridge because we can always take it off later. And I'm definitely like I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm like a section god, but I'm a stickler for small sections. I know it feels like it's gonna take you way longer to get through a haircut, but those small sections definitely produce a much cleaner finish. And when you go back to refine your haircuts, you spend way less time refining them if you just do it right the first time. I don't know, there's that old saying, measure twice, cut once. I'd rather measure 4 times and cut once because it's gonna save me time in the end anyways. And then once I get to that round, you guys remember with that clipper over comb, how we are exploding that length into what we're trying to preserve. Same principles apply here. We can't necessarily cut this as square to the shape that we're creating as we would like because we are preserving so much of that length. So if I were to cut everything flush with this, we would just end up with a weft of hair in the back. And I wanna make sure that we preserve as much of that density back there as possible so we have more to play with later. So about this point on the head is when I'm gonna begin to really exaggerate that angle to preserve that length. And I might even utilize what I just did right there. It's a technique that I call false blending. So when I'm working from super short lengths into extreme lengths, what I like to do, might be easier to see this way. So I wanna make sure that we're not cutting all this length off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a false blend. I still want those short pieces to give the illusion that they're blending into this hair up top naturally, but we need to maintain some of that disconnection, right? So what I'm gonna do is start from the bottom and work out. So I don't wanna cut all that length. I wanna preserve as much of it as possible, but I still wanna make sure that there's a smooth, seamless transition from that short length into that longer length. And that's one of the coolest things about hair. Like once you understand the mechanics and principles and why hair does something, then you can really begin to bend and break all those rules that they told us when we were in school that you can't. Like every single one of those rules is meant to be bent, if not broken. And I think everyone in this room should be doing that. You just have to understand why the hair is doing something before you try to alter it. So now we have the illusion that we have a seamless transition from short hair into long hair, but we still have that disconnection. So if I comb this forward, we have those tendrils of long hair that hang over all of that taper that we've created, and it's all just false blend. So now once this is styled with product, it's gonna sit seamless. Now we'll hit the diagonal backs on this side. There ain't much to cut up here. I might actually just hit that with scissor over comb.
Where did you know when to stop the rubber comb and then do the shear over?
So that clipper over comb is only up to that line that we created with the clipper over comb. So everything else is untouched at this point. So when I pull this hair down, I can see a definitive difference in length, and it's based off right where that weight that we built up is where I'm going to remove all of that length on top that's coming down to it. So it creates a really heavy shelf. A lot of times, like on more traditional comb overs, if I just am laying a straight fade down, so I have my line there of the weight that we've produced with the blend, I'm gonna take everything above it, bring it down to where that weight line is and cut it there. Because I can always mitigate it later, but it's really, really hard to rebuild that weight after you've already compromised it. So that line is gonna be my determining factor of where we end that clipper over comb into everything that I'm doing on top. Does that make sense? So when I had that sectioned out, we had segment 3 up top. So all of that has already been touched with clipper over comb. I don't even like that comb. So all of that has already been touched by clipper over comb. So everything that I let down from segment 3 has been uncut. It's not touched yet. So that's what we're addressing now. So now I'm gonna finish those diagonal backs with that false blend. Yes. It's blending short hair into long hair while still maintaining disconnection. So I'm creating smaller pieces of hair underneath that are the same length as the blend that we've created, but I'm preserving all that length up top. So we're still maintaining length, but giving the appearance of a smooth transition through that length. Now here on this side, we're gonna start working down a little into all that length on the bottom. And when I'm using that false blend, all I'm doing is utilizing what we call the yoke of the shear. It's the center of the shear. And I'm not closing all the way. It's just very, very small movements to be able to manipulate that length as I'm working through. Now, we're gonna take a 1/2 inch section. Yo, these chairs trip me out, Elliot. I've never cut on a chair this fancy before. It's electronic. Stacks, you ever seen these before? Oh yeah? Damn, motherfucker starts working in a shop one day. You need to chill over there. How are those sliders? So I'm gonna take a mohawk section straight down the middle, 1/2 inch wide. This is where you really get to play with the amount of length that you're gonna preserve there in the back, right? There's a couple of ways that you can do this. And I think anyone in the room can see if I hold the back of this hair up, it's gonna extend past everything that we have right here. So we're gonna have to utilize something called a convex layer. So this is gonna go short in the front to extreme in the back. And that's where you get that convex layer. It's not gonna be necessarily a flat line. Your finger angle is gonna decide how much of that length you get to preserve there in the back. So we'll just give him a light trim on top, right? We don't have to go all crazy. All right. I don't know. I don't want this guy to hate me.
than enough.
So right here is where I'm really gonna start to decide how much thickness I want here in the back. And my finger angle is gonna determine all of that. You can already see that we're starting to increase in elevation as we're working back. So now this is where I'm really gonna start to make that much more dramatic. So now you can see my finger angle has gone from relatively flat to I'm almost inverted completely. So your cutting line is just gonna determine 100% of the length that you're able to maintain back here. And now, if I hold that up, we're almost perfect right there, right? So now I, in theory, should be able to take vertical sections here in the back, elevate everything up, and just continue that cutting line. And then we have a super soft, seamless transition from this short length in the front to how much length he has there in the back. Now I'm gonna work left and right. Since we do have density issues here on top, I don't want to point cut into this. I don't want to expose any more of that than we have to. So I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting everything on top blunt. I want that to be as dense as possible. And we all know that when you apply texture to a haircut, what ends up happening is it gives the appearance that that hair is actually less dense than it actually is. This should be our last section right here. Boom. Now we'll work this side. You guys will see as I'm working through this, every time that I finish a section, I comb it forward. So I know exactly what I've already cut, so I'm not gonna get lost in that transition of cut and uncut hair. Last section here. And boom. Now at this point, I'm pretty confident that we can start transitioning to lengthen the back. Another trick I can show you guys, because I do see a couple of density issues in that blend, is something that was taught to me by one of the guys that I work with. And it's how to use texture to your advantage. So we spend all this time creating and manipulating texture on length that's longer than 1/16 of an inch. And all we're trying to do is really address density issues on the side. We all know that density is produced by when there's more strands of hair or hair follicles per square inch on the scalp, right? So if I see an issue that is a little bit more dense than everything around it, instead of going back through and trying to blend that out, because we've already established length there. So it's not length that we need to address any longer, it's simply weight and texture. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the still blade of my texturizers, or my liners rather, and I'm gonna take that still blade and I'm gonna displace the hair on the scalp. And as that still blade moves over the hair, as soon as it moves past that hair, the hair is gonna spring back up and it's gonna get hit by the moving blade on the other side. So this is very much an audible technique. So you're gonna hear this much more than you're gonna see it. You can rework that same area of hair multiple times before you really visually see it, but you will begin to hear it immediately. So let me give you guys an example. So I don't like the density right there. So we're just gonna pull that density out. And this is essentially like using a texturizing shear on, you know, that parietal ridge area. We just need to pull out a little bit of the weight there to give that transition, you know, even more of that buttery softness. Cool? All right, let's cut this back. So quiet in here. I feel like there's no way that I'm answering all of these questions that you guys have in your head this well. Awesome. So I'm not gonna fully saturate this. It's gonna take us way too long to blow dry that out, right? Because with a haircut, you know, being able to style the hair is just as important as being able to cut the hair. I mean, you can make a dope ass fade all day, but if you can't style what's above that fade, that haircut is useless. Sweet. All right. So now we already have our guide that we're just gonna transition back from the top, right? So I'm just gonna take vertical sections. We already have our length established. So I'm just gonna elevate and see how much we actually need to take off. Now we originally set out to preserve as much of the length on top as possible. And I think we're gonna be pretty good there. There's that chemical cut. So we don't really have a ton to take off. We have a little bit of breakage right there, so that's not even gonna end up connecting. So now I have to falsify the line or make it up in my head. So that cutting line is now right there. No. No, I'm elevating everything above the occipital. So let me show. No, since I do I want to trim those ends also. So if I were to let everything below the occipital fall out, I wouldn't be addressing any of that length at the perimeter. So I want to elevate all of that length at the perimeter to be cut on that cutting line, and then I can re-strengthen the perimeter length after. And for all this length here in the back, I'm gonna point cut all of that. I'm just gonna start generating that softness now. No, so this is me continuing with all of those previous sections. So I'm just traveling all of those over as opposed to me just taking one section cleanly, because since his hair is so fine at the ends, I need my previous sections to be dense enough that I can still read my cutting line through everything. So the more hair that I bring, the stronger that line is, and it's easier for me to see that guide. Yeah, I tend to do that a lot when I'm dealing with longer length, is I take tremendously large sections just so that I can make sure that I'm catching my guide every single time. So we haven't even pulled any of the length, but we've completely refreshed the way the back of this haircut looks. And now all that stuff down there, we'll re-strengthen that to establish a much better baseline at the bottom. But now we know for sure that that texture and all of that movement is working all the way from the front through every single strand of hair out the back. This will be the last section of the haircut. Now this is where we'll reestablish that guide on the, that perimeter length on the back. I know you guys are gonna look at my sweaty back right now. Sorry. And now this you can just determine however you want. I just want to reestablish a little bit of strength. This is where that breakage was in the haircut previous. So that's really where I want to reestablish some of that strength. So that means I need to bring this perimeter length up on both sides to establish that strength there in the middle. And just like lining up, the back of someone's neck or a front lineup, I'm always gonna start in the middle and then work outside to inside, outside to inside. We already had that length established in the middle, so all I had to do was take that length here on the outside and make it match what was in the middle. Cool. All right, now we're gonna blow dry this and then refine. You guys got questions? No? Cool. So, a couple of things that I want to do is I want to utilize 2 individual products on 1 head of hair. The reason for that is I want this back to maintain that movement and flow that it has, but I want the top to have a little bit more structure. So I'm going to use our texturizing paste or texturizing clay here in the back. With this stuff, a little bit goes a long way, especially if you're using it to blow dry. Don't put a ton of this product in the hair and expect you to easily be able to move a comb through it. It's just like with any other product. This is gonna be your foundation for the style. So a little bit goes a long way. This is how much I have on my finger. Maybe half of that'll end up in the hair. The way that I always apply product, especially after a blow dry, we'll do it again later, but I treat the palms of my hands almost like, say, the palette, and then my fingertips are gonna be the paintbrush. So I'm gonna take that product off the palette and I'm just gonna run it through the hair. I don't want to come in and saturate everything. I still want this hair to have movement and flow. So just working on the exterior is gonna allow that. Hey, there's a towel. Now, just like the back, I'm also gonna use this as my blow dry foundation on the top. Sweet. Now I'm gonna start on this corner. The reason that I'm always gonna start in the back and work my way forward is one, to save me time, and two, so that I'm not dragging a ton of wet hair into hair that I've already dried. And once we get on top, those reasons are gonna change. Now I'm trying to establish my style in the back so that everything in the front has something to fall back on and essentially is being held up by the back. So if you imagine like the shingles on a roof of the house, those shingles start down and begin to work up towards the apex of the roof, right? Volume is the same way in a haircut. So if we establish all of that volume and style here in the back, and it transitions forward, for this to fall, everything behind that has to fall first. And the likelihood of that happening is super, super slim. So that means you're producing a style that can last all day, as opposed to someone just blow drying the front, throwing a ton of product in it and calling it a day. Then I think I want to put a little bit of bevel at the ends. Just so that we have a little bit of movement. And you guys could blow dry the back with, especially if it's a mullet, you know, this long or there is this much length, you could always round brush this too. I just don't have a round brush, so I'm using a half paddle. All right, now here is where we really start to establish all that volume and everything on top. That texturizing clay that I'm using is awesome because it is so matte finish that it's not gonna slow down your blow drying process. So the higher the moisture content is in any product that you put in the hair, you always have to remember that that's gonna prolong the amount of time that you're taking to finish that style and blow dry that product out. Because not only are you trying to remove the moisture from the hair, now you're trying to remove the moisture from the product as well. So the moisture content on the texturizing clay is super, super low. So it's perfect for really natural finishes. And just like being a really good foundation for the blow dry itself. It has higher memory than it does holds. So it's a perfect complement to any blow dry that you're gonna do. Now I'm gonna work section by section on this side, establishing that volume here in the back as we begin to move forward. And here's a tip for you guys too, for your clients that are in your chair, explain to them how to blow dry their hair like this. Don't just assume that they know how to use these tools. So for majority of my clients, the easiest way for me to educate them at this point in the service is to physically pick up the blow dryer, show them how I would do this on myself at home, and really drill that into them so that they, one, know how to use the product that you're gonna sell to them, and two, know how to replicate that work tomorrow.
Ryan, what's the purpose of this segment?
So this is just gonna remove weight without compromising length or shape. I mean, you could just slide cut it, but if you want to get that texture much deeper into the haircut, that's where creating the channels with the comb comes into play. So it allows you to deliver that texture much deeper into the interior of the haircut than if I were to just elevate and point cut here on the outside. Same thing on this side.
Let's go.
And that's a tiny bit long right there. Boom. Take a little bit more of the texturizing clay. And this is really where the idea of being able to paint this style in with your fingertips as paintbrushes really comes into play. So I'm gonna expand some of that volume and texture that we have, and I'm only utilizing my fingertips to apply that product.
Let's go.
Now for the top, I'm gonna utilize more of like a traditional pomade, but this is gel based. So it's a little bit heavier than your traditional water soluble pomades while this is water soluble. So if the viscosity is too high, you can always break it with a tiny bit of water before you decide to put it in the hair. I do that with a lot of pomades because sometimes pomades are just way too heavy for me. So I'll break the viscosity and then apply the product. In the same way, we take all this time establishing all of this volume up top that we wanna maintain. So the last thing I wanna do is come in and smash everything down and then utilize the product to be what's building all the volume. I want the product to aid in the style and vice versa. So now all I'm gonna do is just drag a tiny bit of that through. And since this is a little bit more high shine, what I'm gonna use this for is to create false highlights in the back. So when this hair touches natural light, what ends up happening is light reflects differently off a matte finished product than it does something that has medium to high shine. So I wanna give a little bit of shine and pop to this hair without changing the style. And the way that I'm gonna do that is just put a tiny bit through a couple of strands of hair so that light refracts differently off those strands than it does everything else. Hit it with a little bit of comb. Boom. And that's how I cut a mullet and use Venture to style it. Cool. I'm just gonna trim his beard real quick. Y'all could make drinks and stuff. Well, no, we're leaving it just like that. That's it. That's all she wrote. You guys have any questions about any of the products used, techniques, anything? Nah? Yes. So it's medium to heavy. I always break the viscosity with a little bit of water on products that are medium to heavy because I prefer lightweight products overall. I think out of majority of traditional pomades is probably it's like smack dab in the middle, but a tiny bit of water breaks the viscosity and gets it moving a lot easier. But the hold itself is like a medium. It's fantastic.
What was that? Nice.
He does. Dude, I'm not gonna lie. I was contemplating cutting it all off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just so I wouldn't have to be shown up.
This has been 2 years in the making.
Real talk, Marcus, I swear to God, bro, when I'm writing this, envisioning you getting out of the window of a car. What do you call those crash car derbies? What do you call them?
Demolition derbies?
Demolition derby.
Just jumps out the front of an IROC Z, slams a Miller Lite. It's living the dream.
Shake that, pull it out, huh?
There you go, man. My pleasure. God damn, those are big ass hands, dude. Hey, thanks guys. This is actually the first event that we've done as a company. We plan on doing a hell of a lot more of these. So probably keep your eyes peeled because you will be seeing Venture again. So yeah, that's the next time I'll see you guys. Thanks for hanging out.